Can you hear me okay, Judge Mitchell?
I can.
Oh, great. We can hear you perfectly. There is a special guest in tonight's class. Professor or Dr. Gail Cummings is here, and she says hello.
Hello, Gail.
Hey. How are you?
I'm good. How are you and the family?
We're all good, and every time I see this film, I get very choked up. Judge Mitchell, it reminds me of, he's actually the reason I became a runner. I don't know if you actually know that. I'm still only at the 12K mark, so I've got some mileage, a few kilometers so I can catch up and join you.
And Gail, can you share with your classmates how long we have known one another?
Ooh, probably 40 years. And I'm only 40, so it's pretty crazy. It's 40 years. But, Judge Mitchell was actually my husband's English teacher in high school at Sarah High School in Los Angeles. And so we became close friends after John and I got married. So he actually spoke at our wedding. Judge Mitchell is an incredible person. It's, as you will learn just from the limited amount of that you get from this beautiful film, which is just very heartwarming. And I just so appreciate you every time I watch it.
Gail, it's great to see you.
You too. I'll let you get back to class.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you so much, Judge Mitchell. I just wanted to just open it up for you to share any highlights or any new updates about the Skid Row Running Club and your organization, and just take it away.
Well, you just saw sort of the tip of the iceberg. You have yet to meet the woman who was featured in this documentary, Rebecca Hayes. She was a heroin addict, single mother. Fast forward to the end of the movie, she goes to Rome with us. She is now a surgical nurse in Seattle. David Askew is the one individual who continues to struggle in terms of moving his life forward, but he has not used drugs for years. Ben Shirley, later in the movie, you will be introduced to the fact that he was accepted into the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and actually was the student body president at that institution. He now writes musical scores for major motion pictures. Rafael Cabrera, who served, as he indicated, close to 30 years in state prison for first-degree murder, has worked for the last 7 years for the Department of Water and Power. He owns his own home. He is married. And most recently, he just came back on our latest international run where we ran the New Delhi Marathon. Since this movie was filmed, we have been to Vietnam, to Berlin, to Ecuador, the Galapagos Islands. We have been to Jerusalem, to Jordan, Egypt. Every year we go on an international marathon. And whereas we took 3 people to run in Accra, Ghana, our most recent trip to New Delhi, we had 60 runners. So the club is just growing and growing, and the lives impacted, continue to, be the defining aspect of this program.
That is so wonderful to hear. I was lucky enough to see most of the film. I'm pretty sure I saw all of it. And it's just great to hear the updates of where the key characters or runners who we, hopefully we'll all get to meet in this film, where they are today, and the many successes of the program. And it's incredible the number of participants in the last marathon, 60 runners. That is wonderful.
And in addition to running an international marathon, every year we run about 3 other marathons locally. This past weekend, we just did a 38-mile ultra run in Joshua Tree down here in Southern California. Every September, we do an ultra marathon, the length of the LA River from Canoga Park to the Queen Mary, which is 54 miles. We'll be running in Griffith Park with other running clubs 2 weekends from now. I mean, just the point that I'm trying to make is that the running club is so critical to people maintaining their sobriety because of its regularity. We run Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and we run 52 weeks out of the year. And so people who are in recovery, they know that 3 times a week, if not more, they are going to be around people who have a common life experience, facing common challenges, and they're around people who care about them. The runners refer to it as our family, and it's a overused description, but I think it's appropriate in this context. The running club, the running is secondary. What is of primary importance is the sense of community that we offer one another. And that's what is really restorative in my mind.
Wonderful. Well, I had one question for you. I think you mentioned this previously when we spoke. At San Quentin State Prison, you also have an activity, a running club, and an annual event. Could you tell us about that?
Sure. A few years back, we were invited to run with the 1,000-mile running club, which is San Quentin's running club. And so we go up once a year. We run with the inmates in the yard, probably about 10 to 12 miles. The yard is packed with other inmates playing basketball, tennis, lifting weights, and we're running the perimeter of the San Quentin yard. We then end up having lunch with the other inmates in the general cafeteria. We go up to the main cell block. We spend about half of the day there. And we've been involved in the program long enough that some of the individuals who have been serving life sentences in San Quentin have been released, and now they run with us during the week. And so there's a wonderful connection that we have with that program.
Well, that's amazing. I just want to open it up to the class. If you all have any questions for Judge Mitchell. I'll be passing around the mic. We have one question here.
Hi, my name's Tinley. Thanks so much for being here. I know you can't see me, but how is this still just like informally administrated? Is it just kind of the group regulates itself and everything, or with all these like fundraisers and everything, is there someone who now the group has kind of identified, or someone that you found because it's kind of grown bigger than its britches and needs to have, more organization? It's just amazing that it's grown this big and you're doing all of this and there isn't someone who's really in charge, or I don't know.
About 3 or 4 years ago, we became a registered 501c3, a registered nonprofit. So the money all goes to a central location. To take 60 people to India was a proposition that cost the club almost $200,000. And so, this isn't nickel and diming it anymore. What is so great about the movie, it has played internationally. It was featured in 25 film festivals around the world. It won Best Documentary or Audience Favorite in 21 out of those 25 film festivals. And so we get donations almost on a daily basis from people who see the movie and want to make sure that our program continues to be viable. We have no paid staff. We do have a 14-member board. But, if I could give up my day job I'm sure I could expand the program even more, but the
If there could-
Skid Row Running Club isn't going to pay my mortgage, and I have to tend to that as well.
Fair enough.
Great questions. Any other questions?
Hi, my name's Elise, also a student here. Thank you for being here, and I really enjoyed this as well and hearing your updates about the people in the film. But I was just wondering, my experience here in the Bay Area has been with Back on My Feet, which this reminds me a little bit of prior to starting PA school. We would meet early in the morning near the Tenderloin in SF. Outside City Hall and do something really similar, working towards the SF half marathon. Not quite the same. A lot of it is just mostly unhoused people, but connections to job training and stuff. Just want to say that that's neat to see something that's kind of in tandem, and also ask if you are familiar with that organization or have any connections with them at all.
I am. Back on Your Feet used to be a very viable program on Skid Row in Los Angeles. It sort of fell apart over the last few years, which has been a real shame. We were certainly not in competition with them, but there were some internal politics within the organization that didn't play out well. You reference, job training, education, the Skid Row Running Club. Please don't think that all we do is provide an opportunity for our participants to exercise. We have housing, because most of our runners at some point in time were or are homeless. We have educational placement, and we have job training. Case in point, we had 2 doctors who heard about the program. They started to run with us on the weekends. They have now hired 5 of our runners to do healthcare outreach to Los Angeles's homeless community. And these are not marginal jobs. The people who have been hired by this healthcare organization at a minimum are paid $65,000 a year. The top end is closer to 85. So if you can imagine someone who was addicted, homeless, and then over the course of maybe a year or 2, they find themselves earning a great income, having their own apartment. It's transformative across all aspects of a person's life.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, yeah, I guess just wanted to share that at least they're still alive and well in San Francisco. So that's really neat to see. And also it's just really fun. It was always really fun to show up and check in with the guys and hear, oh, so-and-so got me hired at whatnot now, and I'm doing that. And I moved in with my sister, and I don't know, just those stories, kind of like you're saying, are really cool and special. And I miss running with them. So maybe once I graduate, I can go back. So yeah, thank you so much.
And just to offer a footnote, because I have a little sense of what your program is about. The individual at the beginning that Davon Williams sentenced to 70 some odd years to life. That was the minimum sentence that I could impose to Davon Williams. I have always felt that that was an unjust sentence. Davon Williams, along with 2 of his gang members, ended up getting in a shootout with 3 detectives from the LA Sheriff's Department. When Davon jumped out of the car and the gun battle began, Davon threw his gun to the curb and took off. He did not fire a single shot. But when you have 3 alleged victims of attempted murder of a police officer, you have a gang enhancement that adds another 10 years. You have a gun enhancement that adds another 20 years. You get to these astronomical numbers very quickly. And luckily, our state legislature has revisited some of the inequities in these sentencing schemes. I will fast forward it to tell you, I recently resentenced Davon Williams to 15 years. He is being released from state prison January of 2024. He is being given his life back.
Wow, that is so powerful to hear what really ended up happening, because I remember that scene so vividly, and at the beginning of the film, and I wondered what happened.
Well, what happened, it has bothered me for a long, long time. And as soon as the law changed, I took it upon myself to appoint an attorney to represent him when he was in prison. And that attorney then renegotiated with the district attorney's office for a new sentence.
It's so important, the laws, the policies that we study in this course, and that you all will begin to study more this summer, how powerful, how instrumental they are in changing lives. I mean, we talk about advocating for change, and that is real change there. And so many groups have been pushing for resentencing laws. And so that's a wonderful example of how you're able to revisit the injustice that you felt at the time, Judge Mitchell, that was really evident in that time, at that trial. Thank you for sharing that. That is really, really.
Well, I just hope that your students understand that, I end up engaging in a sentencing, handling a case, presiding over a jury trial. They stick with me, and any conscientious bench officer, isn't simply going to wash their hands of what transpired. If something played out that doesn't sit right.
Thanks, Judge Mitchell. My name is Annalise. I'm another student here. I was wondering, because we've been learning so much in the last few weeks about persecutorial and resentencing reforms that are going on. What does the future of the criminal justice system look like to you? Where do you see it going? And what do you think would work?
Well, if you have, about 10 hours, you and I can have a meaningful discussion about that question. I've been involved in the criminal justice system the better part of my professional life. And there are some things that our legislators are getting right in terms of making necessary corrections. There are other things that I think they are getting horribly wrong. So many statutes paint with such a broad brush. To illustrate that point, I don't know if you're aware of the fact, but under the felony murder rule, that no longer exists. It used to be, for instance, if you participated in a robbery and someone ends up getting killed, even though you were not the trigger person, because you were involved in a felony act, you would be culpable for murder. That is no longer the law in California. And so we have to do a completely different analysis as to what was your level of involvement in the crime. If you weren't a major participant in the robbery, then you cannot be held accountable for the death of the individual who died. And basically, I think that's a good call. Where it presents a real difficulty, let's say you get a robbery where all three participants in the robbery were armed. One person ends up getting shot and killed. Then the question becomes for me to decide, the person who did not actually kill the victim in that case, but was armed with a firearm, what is the appropriate sanction for that person? And that is a much more difficult, nuanced question to ask, or answer rather. Because degrees of culpability are completely driven by what factually happened at any particular crime scene. And when you have just overall broad statutory language, then you try and plug in the facts that are unique and particular to it, the commission of a particular crime. It's square peg in a round hole situation all too often. If that makes any sense to you. The other thing, let me amplify on that. For instance, in Los Angeles County, our current district attorney, and of course in San Francisco, your former district attorney, was not proceeding on the 3 strikes proposition. I had an individual in my court last month. Prior convictions of 2 armed robberies. Prior convictions of 2 assault with a deadly weapon in which the victims were gravely injured. So he had 4 prior strikes. The open case he had in front of me was another robbery with a firearm. I mean, there's a certain point where you go, how many victims are you going to accrue before we say you're going to take a serious timeout? And this particular individual, none of the strikes were pled or alleged. It wasn't the robbery they imposed midterm. So he's got this horrible record, and he was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. I got a problem with that. I had another individual in my court, stabbed 13 times, almost bled out on the pavement, completely innocent victim, older gentleman. Current district attorney in Los Angeles doesn't believe in alleging enhancements. So you get an additional 3 years for great bodily injury. This man stood up in the courtroom and said, I almost died. Are you telling me, Judge Mitchell, that this person isn't going to get a little bit more time for almost killing me? And I had to look at the gentleman and I said, that's not my call to make. That is the prosecutor's call. And so he almost kills this man. And again, what does he get in terms of a sanction? He gets 4 years at 80%. So he'll do a little bit over 3 years for almost killing a person. So, you know, where we're going to go in terms of the criminal justice system, you know, is anybody's guess.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know that was a really loaded question, so thank you for the elevator pitch.
Okay, and the thing is, one person you got introduced to in the movie, Rafael Cabrera, 28 years, 9 months, X number of days, first-degree murder. I believe that, and I argued to the parole board, that Rafael should be released. Because if you go to prison and you take advantage of the programming that is offered, you do the anger management, you do the college coursework, you do the self-help programs, you do the job training programs. And Rafael had done that for about the last 10 years of his incarceration. If a person really redefines themselves, let them out. Rafael earned his way out of prison, and rightfully so. But he killed a 16-year-old kid, Jerry Rodriguez. I've seen Jerry's funeral plot here in Los Angeles. Should Raphael have been seriously sanctioned for taking that young kid's life for absolutely no valid reason? Yes. So, you can see I get a little worked up over this stuff.
And it's understandable. I mean, especially with the relationship that you have with a lot of post-incarceration individuals, and like through your work, I mean, I'm sure it's a really hard dichotomy to balance both internally and with like the external pressures that you have. So
Well, and the real conundrum is, okay, if a person has redefined themselves, what is an appropriate punishment for horrendous conduct, but you don't want to throw that person's life away by keeping them locked up indefinitely? And where do you strike the appropriate balance?
I'll let you know when we've learned more. Thank you again. I'm going to hand the microphone off.
Thank you. Really enjoyed that exchange and those questions. Just wanted to see if there was one last question before. Great.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name's Natalie, and from the reading, it kind of hinted at you having a background in running, and you mentioned in the movie that there's kind of this aspect of discipline. From your personal experience and work experience, do you feel like the discipline factor is kind of the biggest thing to help prevent like recidivism or issues in the future, or what do you feel like are
the discipline is crucial, but as I said earlier in my remarks, it's just being around good, caring people that brings out those qualities that have, been overshadowed by homelessness and addiction. But yes, I mean, you're not going to go to Egypt or to India or any other place that we go to unless you run regularly. And so you have to get out there even when you don't feel like it. But, for those of you who engage in that type of strenuous aerobic exercise, you understand the endorphins that are released make you feel better. There are certain running programs, primarily on the East Coast, interestingly enough, that in order to be in their recovery program, you must run, or you can't be in their recovery program. There is such a positive correlation between serious aerobic exercise and being able to not relapse that it's just an excellent tool.
And how much of the participation in the program these days is from recruitment or word of mouth, or are you actively kind of seeking out people, or do they usually come to the club for participation?
A lot of it is word of mouth. I mean, obviously, the vast majority of our individuals who are in recovery are regular participants in 12-step programs throughout the city of Los Angeles. And invariably, during breaks at an AA or an NA meeting, it'll come up, I'm in this running program down on Skid Row. It really helps me maintain my sobriety. Why don't you come in and join us? And so that's how we attract a significant number of our runners. As well, the major missions downtown, you've got 3 major missions: Midnight Mission, Union Rescue Mission, and LA Mission. And all of them are keenly aware of our program and direct people who want to avail themselves of this type of activity to us. And, as I indicated, we run Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. It is a rare day that we do not have someone new joining our ranks.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Well, I think we're coming up to the end of our hour with you, Judge Mitchell, and I just want to thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining us for tonight's class. I can't think of a better way to culminate the end of our spring semester. We're almost done. We got one more week, but this is our.
Can I make one quick interjection?
Yes, please.
Please understand that my involvement with my friends in recovery has made me a far better judge. And whatever career that you pursue in the public health area, in the medical area, to the extent that you can really gain a better understanding of the community that you serve, you are far more effective. And, you know, so many of the individuals who come into my courtroom, the underlying issue of their criminality deals with addiction. And so for me to understand how addiction manifests itself in an individual, what they have to deal with, what is an appropriate approach to maintaining sobriety in that person's life. I mean, I understand that today a million times better than I did before I got involved in the running club. And I just wish that more bench officers, more policymakers who are addressing the homeless crisis, the addiction crisis, you know, had the type of exposure that the Skid Row Running Club has provided me to understand, you know, the issues in a way that otherwise you simply don't. I'm
That's-
sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's so well said. And it really brings us to why Dr. Cummings had the vision of starting this concentration along with other faculty for so many years. And we finally got to this point where we can offer this concentration, and many of our students have come into the class, and it's attracted them to study this intersection of criminal justice and public health. For lots of those reasons. I think they themselves, seeing themselves as future clinicians who are also working as public health advocates, will have a better enhanced understanding of the communities they serve through this public health lens focused on health equity, but also where it intersects with criminal justice involved populations, what they experience. And, you know, it's something that touches all of us. We can't just pretend that, you know, we're separate from people who have addiction or don't have addiction. It's something that, you know, there's so much stigma attached to it. And we also focus on criminalizing people instead of providing treatment. And so many of my students have been very passionate about their vision of how they would want to care for their communities and go and serve their communities. So I think you're really, it's sort of in parallel with your experience, and just watching the film and learning about your organization and how you've made the difference in the lives of the runners and vice versa.
And let me interject just a quick second. You know, my ability to positively impact the lives of my fellow runners is significantly, you know, a result of the regularity of my contact. You know, in a courtroom setting, it's very structured. I may have an opportunity at sentencing to say a few words to a person, but I don't kid myself. You know, a little speech at the end of sentencing, the vast majority of the time isn't going to make any difference in that person's life. But if you run X number of marathons a year, you break bread with people on a regular basis, You take that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning when someone is on the cusp of relapsing. You drive downtown to get someone out of the gutter. You do that, you know, for a prolonged period of time. That's where you make the impact. That's where you realize success. You know, and our policymakers, you know, if they don't understand the level of resources that need to be committed to overcome methamphetamine and fentanyl, these problems are not going to be impacted in any material way.
Right. Thank you for that. And also it's so important for us to see the restorative justice, the healing that comes through the opportunity to be able to train and run with a family, a camaraderie, a group of people, peer support on a regular basis. I mean, like you said, running releases endorphins. Any exercise I do, I have a big smile on my face. If I don't know why, it hurts most of the time, but it makes you feel good, and that's part of it. But it's also the discipline. It's also the fact that there's someone who has faith in you and belief in you, and you have that support.
And the great thing about running, we have physicians, we have myself as a judge, we have lawyers. We actually have a group of about 7 LAPD officers who run with us. And, you know, nobody's wearing a badge, nobody's carrying a gun, I'm not wearing a black robe. You know, when you are running a marathon, you are all equal. You are simply trying to cover the distance. And the superficial distinctions that society imposes on us to elevate some and, you know, suppress others. You know, anybody who's run a marathon, you know that those are meaningless concepts out there on a marathon course.
Wow, that's simply beautiful. All are equal, and that's really great. And then I just wanted to ask you, would there be another movie?
Will there be another movie? Highly unlikely, though. Interestingly enough, if any of you have HBO, HBO is doing a full segment on our program in June.
Wow.
Okay. So, you know, we continue to get noticed. And what is so wonderful about these type of opportunities is it validates the worth of our runners. They understand that if HBO is going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together a very nicely produced program, their life has to be, their story, their struggle, their accomplishment imparts worth to those individuals. Otherwise, you know, they'd just be ignored. And folks are not ignoring the success stories that are happening on Skid Row.
Where are you going next? Where's your next trip?
Where is our next trip? Good question. My preference is always to go to a third world country, because if I want to go to a first world country, I can just step outside of the courthouse. But people are talking about perhaps running the Paris Marathon. So I'll have to sort of acquiesce to the other members of the board and, you know, wave the white flag on that one.
Sounds good.
Okay. But, you know, for our runners to be, you know, imagine you've been seriously addicted. You've never been on an airplane before. Imagine how you must feel to stand at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. One of our best trips was to Jordan. We went to Petra. And when we arrived, it was like 5 o'clock in the evening. The sun is setting over Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses. And there's enough clouds in the, I mean, just a gorgeous sky. And in the far distance, if any of you have been to Petra, Jordan, on the top of one of the mountains, you see Moses's brother, Aaron. His tomb is visible from standing where we were standing. And for our runners to behold that, you know, when 8 months, a year before they were in the grips of addictions, most of our runners were in tears. It was so emotionally overwhelming for them to understand the distance that they covered.
Oh, you paint that's a beautiful picture in my mind of seeing that. Do we know someone who went on that run?
Pardon me?
Camille Cummings? That's right.
They didn't exactly run.
I thought they went to Jerusalem.
That's
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Oh, gosh. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Judge Mitchell, for your time and being
I'm gonna bill you for the extra 10 minutes.
Okay. So, I used to support one of the missions. I was born in LA and lived in Pasadena up until 2007, and I used to support one of them. And so I'm going to keep doing that because they always use LA mission, LA mission, yeah, or the Union one as well. So it's good to know that that's another way that people can find out about you and what the work that you do, and join you all for runs every week.
And if anyone has any interest in following us, we post almost daily on Instagram and Facebook. You know, if I miss a run, which is very rare, you know, I will get an email. Oh, I was looking at your posting. Where were you last Monday? So we're very easy to follow.
Oh, great. I'm at least on Instagram myself. That's great. Thank you. We will definitely be looking out for the debut on HBO in June, and we'll be following you on Instagram. And
Please encourage your students to watch the rest of the movie.
I will.
Okay.
Some ways to make it available earlier today. And so we'll be getting it through the library as well. So they'll have access to it anytime.
Excellent. And I just want to wish all of your students, you know, extremely meaningful, satisfying careers. Your choice of what you want to do with your life is why I am happy to stay at the courthouse a little late this afternoon, because we need more people with an equivalent commitment to improve our communities. And so thank you.
Thank you.